Fantastic. Okay, so let me give you kind of a quick rundown just so that you guys know you're more than welcome and encouraged to take notes. I will tell you everything you'll see up on a screen will be emailed to you in a PDF slide, so you can, for your own sake, screenshot things if you'd like. You don't have to, though, because you'll receive a digital copy of all these slides after this as well. So, Vision Night 2025. I'll kind of go back. I don't know if you guys, some of you, I think most of you knew this, but from the summer of 2014, August of 2014, all the way up to July of 2023, I worked in some form of marketing and branding, whether it was happening within the church or like kind of a church network or movement of things, or working outside in business and helping like start or like with entrepreneurial businesses and startups and kind of e-commerce businesses. And so I worked in that space and kind of brand building and marketing. And a lot of people, I think, make the mistake of assuming that marketing and brand building are one and the same. But they're actually not. There's actually a difference between marketing and between brand building. I'll define it for you in this way, okay? Marketing, to me, is the promotion and the selling of products or services. You're just trying to move stuff. You're trying to move product. You're trying to move services. You're trying to just kind of get that stuff out the door into the hands of people, and you're just trying to create strategies that are going to get people to purchase and buy more. Whereas brand building or branding is not about a logo. Sometimes a lot of people think a brand is about a logo, but branding is actually much more than that. It's far more emotional. Branding is about the expectations and the memories and the experiences and the stories that are told about your product or service. So when I say a brand such as Lululemon, there's a story that you've told yourself or that you've been told about that product or about that brand. There's something that you kind of imagine or envision when you hear about a brand like Target compared to a Walmart, right? You get what I'm saying here? There's like a different set of emotions, a different set of experiences, a different set of responses to these things. And this is important because one of the things that started to happen for us, one of the things that started to happen really kind of last year that I really started to kind of take note of was that over the course of 2024, I started to hear kind of a very similar set of stories or experiences as people were relaying and speaking those things back to me. There was a lot of great things that happened in 2024 in our church. You received the magazine, then you kind of picked up or read some of the testimonies, some of those things. So there's a lot to celebrate, and there was a lot that was taking place. But kind of this consistent thread throughout the whole of 2024 was this kind of language that people were using to describe both what they were experiencing and what they were encountering at MetaChurch, but also how God was using MetaChurch in their lives. And I'll give you a few examples, okay? You'll see some of these up on the screen here from a few different people. O'Neill, talked about MetaChurch has been helping him reconnect with God. You had someone like Max who spoke about, I'm pretty new to Meta and new to the faith as well. Or Fur, who moved back to Mexico, and I was looking for a church where I could connect and feel close to God. And these are just three of the examples, but there were dozens, maybe scores of examples of people, conversations where they were like, I'm connecting with God, or I'm coming back to God, or I'm trying to explore faith, or I'm coming back to my faith. Or this is the first time that I've gone to church by my own volition or by my own choice. I didn't grow up, I grew up in this, but then when I went to college or when I became a teenager, it was kind of like, I'm done with that. And then now I'm in my 30s, and this is the first time that I've been to a church setting in decades. And it kind of started to come together for me. I'm a bit of a slow learner because by October, November, it kind of hit me. It's like, wait a minute, this is our brand. This is our brand, and that people are telling, these are the stories, the experiences, the memories that they're speaking about and that they're encountering through our church and through our people, and it's really shaping the story of who we are as a church and the way that people share or express and talk about who we are as a church. Now, here's what I want you to know. Our vision as a church has remained the same from the very beginning. We've always said MetaChurch is about changing the city so that we can change the world. When we look at MetaChurch, we realize, or when we look at this city, it's really just an intersection, right? And so New York City is just this giant intersection where the world meets. By show of hands real quick, how many of you were born in New York City, the 5 boroughs? Okay, the minority. How many of you moved to New York City for a job or a career or schooling or an opportunity of some kind? Okay, the majority. And so what you find is that the world just kind of meets here. This becomes this intersection where people from all over the world come to New York City. And if you go to partnership class, or if you've been at partnership class, you've heard us talk about this in a little bit more detail and far more depth. But people from all over the globe find themselves here for a period of time before going back to some other part of the world to do whatever it is they want to do. Start a family, settle down, get out of the chaos, save money, whatever it might be. And so our vision has been, if we change the city, then you realistically have the opportunity to change the world, because the world comes here, but they don't stay here. And so if you can meet people here and help them experience the change and the transformative power of Jesus in their lives, and they leave differently, and then they go back commissioned to change wherever it is in the world that God has called them to. So that's always been our vision. But when you think about our brand, when you think about the story or the memory or the experience, it's really simple, and it's not something I made up. It's something that people keep saying repeatedly over and over and over again. Our brand is quite simple. We help people find their way back to God. We help people find their way back to God. Now, let me kind of do a little theological digress, because there's always someone who wants to have some smart aleck comment about theology, and I'll just speak to her. Well, they're not connected to God if they don't know Jesus. Okay. Luke 15, there are 3 parables Jesus gives about a coin, a sheep, and a son. And he uses the word lost. You can't lose something if it was never yours in the first place. And they all come back. They're all found. They're all rediscovered. We are God's people. We are God's creation. And the way back to God is through Jesus. But God created us as his. And our brand as a church is to help connect people back to God. This city is filled with people, countless people, who are looking for every which way, desperately lost, desperately detached from God, and they are looking for someone, somewhere, somehow. Desperately trying to find him. Desperately trying to find something that makes it feel like they found him. Desperately hoping that this ritual or this experience or this encounter or this numbing might make me feel like I'm emotionally connected to something far greater than myself. But they have no idea where to go. They have no idea where to turn. And a few months ago, as I was reading through Scripture, the Holy Spirit kind of used a verse in the book of Hosea chapter 12, verse 6, to kind of illustrate this and in fact reinforce this as I was thinking about tonight, as I was thinking about our vision and knowing we were going to do this at the start of the year. Back in late October, early November sometime, this verse kind of just struck me, and it was like God speaking through Hosea to me about us. So now come back to your God, act with love and justice, and always depend on him. So now come back to your God. I've talked in recent months with a multitude of pastors and church leaders here in New York City and around the United States, and even a few others in other parts of the world. And I keep sharing with them that there is this trend, there is this kind of resurgence of sorts where people are looking for God, eager to come back. It's not uncommon for someone to show up to Meta Church on a Sunday and for them to say one of the first things that comes out of their mouth, I've never been to church before. Literally happened today. Another person today said to me, I've done what I've never done in 30 plus years, and I picked up a Bible out of last week's sermon and decided to read about Jesus. There is this hunger and this eagerness of people seeking to come back to God. And all we've tried to do as a church is point them back to him and say, hey, come back to him. Come to God. Act with love. Act with justice. And depend on him. Live in him. Abide in him. Rest in him. Trust in him. Walk in him. And this is what we've aimed for. This is what we've been striving for. And before we had kind of a little pithy statement to kind of shape our brand or define our brand. This is what we were trying to do from the beginning, is just help people find their way back to God. Now, what's great about this and what's been really encouraging is that people are finding us. Now, we're not God, but they are finding us. In fact, check this out. Last year, this is kind of striking, 454 people came to MetaChurch for the first time last year. This side's excited. This side's we could do better. Of those 454, 200 came back a second time. Okay, there you go. And last year, 398 people subscribed to MetaChurch's YouTube channel, which, again, I'm not necessarily like, wow, like, this is crazy, this is amazing, but it's outsized and disproportionate to who we are and the size and the scope of what we've been as a church. And again, it's easy to look at these things and think, wow, like, that's amazing, or that's just a number, but these are like actual people, and as we've said before, like, every number has a name, and every name has a story, and every story matters to God. Again, just last week, I received an email from someone, and they took a photo of their husband going back and watching sermons from the past, and his son sitting there on his lap watching sermons. Like, he was going deep into the archives. And so it might be 398 seemingly nameless or faceless people, but these are real people, real lives, engaging, watching a lot of me, which makes me really uncomfortable, but they're interested. And as encouraging as this is, I will say that I started to sense at the end of last year, like, wow, this is encouraging, this is exciting, but as we were kind of shaping, or as I was kind of leaning in and pressing, God, where are you leading us and where are you taking us? I felt that there needed to be, or I sensed that God was saying there needs to be a shift in the culture or a pivot in the community, and it needs to kind of transition. Here's what I mean. Luke chapter 19, verse 10, Jesus speaking about himself says, "For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost." To seek and save. What he didn't say is the Son of Man came to be found. He came to find. And so it's great that people are finding us, but there needs to be a shift, and the shift needs to transition where these past few years have been about people finding us, but now it needs to be about us finding them. It's great, and honestly, it's quite convenient that people find us. I remember the first kind of stint of MetaChurch when we were like literally, physically, metaphorically underground. We met in a basement. And I remember we had a website, but we weren't really interested in trying to promote our website or trying to get the word out. It was very much word of mouth, kind of almost like invitation-only style to church. Not because we didn't want people coming, but it was like, hey, we're trying to do something different here. And people would show up randomly to this basement on 99th Street, and we're like, how'd you find us? And they're like, oh, I saw your website online. I'm like, I look for our website, and I can't find it. I remember there was a story of a guy who came and he's like, actually, Chris and I weren't even there this Sunday, but he showed up and he's like, I found out about you guys from Chris. And everyone's like, Chris? Who is Chris? There's no Chris in our church. We're like 12 people. So there's definitely no way we might have like missed a Chris amongst us. And turns out this guy had gone on a mission trip, a medical mission trip to Iraq, and he connected with this guy, Chris. Both of them connected on this medical mission trip because neither one of them knew anything about medicine, and somehow got talked into going on this trip, and they just carried stuff over to the people who actually could do something with it, and they met there. This guy moved to New York City, and his friend Chris had once lived in New York City, and he said, hey, Chris, where should I go to church? He's like, well, if you're on the Upper East Side, you should go to MetaChurch. Happens to be that he was on the Upper East Side. Get this, Chris was a teenager that I would hire in high school when he was a high school student to lead worship for our middle school camps when I lived out in Washington State. And so God was sending people to Iraq to find us. So I'm telling you, it's quite convenient, but there needs to be a shift. Because again, as Luke 19:10 says, Jesus didn't come to be found, he came to seek. He came to find, and he came to look for those around him. And I think, again, when we think about this, it's really easy It's really easy because, one, we're surrounded by people. I visited Montana. I'll talk about this a little bit later tonight. But I visited Montana last year, and I went to a town called Fort Smith, Montana. The whole town, at its seasonal high, which is the summer, it's right on the Bighorn River. People go there to fish. And when I went there, the seasonal high of population is 126 people. I'm pretty sure that many people live on my floor in my building, or at least above me in the apartment, because that's what it sounds like sometimes. So there is no shortage of people in this city. If you narrow it down or prune it down further, there is no shortage of people who are looking for God. There are no shortage of people who are in search of something, even if they don't know what that something or that someone is. And as we moved toward the end of last year, one of the things that I felt clearly and I felt almost explicitly was that, Ricky, you've got to lead people. And I'll be honest, I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, this isn't easy or natural for me. I'm the king of creative job titles. What do you do for a living? I'm a community activist. I'm a public speaker. I started a nonprofit. Because I'm like, man, you tell them I'm a pastor, and so many times it's been like such a conversation killer. Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna put my headphones on. Thanks. Don't talk to me for the next 6 hours. Or I'm at a coffee shop. Oh, I'm a pastor. Oh, I've been meaning to talk to someone like you. Like, no, God, not me. Please. Getting all sorts of conspiracies and God knows what else. But there needs to be a shift. And so this year, we want to kind of help activate and engage this mission of finding, and there's kind of two like immediate or like kind of practical, tangible next steps tied to and associated with this idea of finding people. And the first, we'll kind of call it this way, like a D-Pro workshop, okay? When it comes to evangelism, which is the word that would be used to talk about sharing your faith or sharing the gospel of Jesus or pointing people, talking about God in an explicit manner, there's really kind of two aspects of this. There's demonstration, which is showing people how you live through the way you live your life. And then there's proclamation, which is speaking it. I was talking with someone recently, and they were asking me about, okay, so like, how do you, what does it look like? Because I'm not supposed to be a pastor, but what does it look like to, does that mean, how do I do this? And I was like, well, it's the way you live and the way that you talk and the way that, so like, basically just like showing them with my actions. I'm like, yeah, and like speaking about it. But like, if I just show them, I'm like, no, it's both. And it's funny how so many times we're like, well, if I'm just a good person, or if I'm just a kind person, or I don't use profanity when someone like crosses me or that deal doesn't close, like then maybe they'll see a difference. But evangelism, Jesus said, come and see and go and tell. It was both. There was demonstration and proclamation. And so later this year, we're going to be doing a D-Pro workshop, which will probably take place on a Saturday, some part of the first part of the day, and it's going to be an evangelism workshop, building off of these two tenets, because if you're like me, listen, I know, I can feel insecure about this. Did I say the right things or the right way? Or what if they ask me questions that I don't have answers to? Or why is it not just enough to like show them that I'm a follower of Jesus? Why do I have to actually talk about this? And so maybe you feel a bit kind of out of your element when you get in those situations. I know I could probably count on one hand the number of people I know in my life who are, I don't even know if natural is the right word, but they are flipping good at this. But I'm talking about 5 people max. The rest of us, and myself included, this is a tension point. Kind of an awkward moment. If you want a date, we don't have a date, but more than likely it'll be something that occurs somewhere later in the year, May-ish, June-ish. The second thing is far more nearsighted and far simpler. And it's just kind of summed up with this idea of these are my two. These are my two. Well, Ricky, there's 8.5 million people in New York City. How do I talk to all of them? You don't need to. You just need to talk to 2. In fact, I said to this conversation with this person that was asking me, well, like if I just show them, right? And I'm like, no, listen, those people that you work with, They may never show up here. So I can never tell them. I'll never have an opportunity to speak it. That's on you. That's your community. That's your mission field. That's your space. That's your environment. And I'm not as smart as you, so I can't get access into your employer. I mean, the reality is this guy does stuff that I couldn't even describe it. I do laundry sometimes. I folded laundry yesterday. Oh, first time in a while. Yeah, right. It's recorded. I'll come back off record. But who are your two? Who are your two people? You don't need 30. You don't need 40. But there are two people, at least, that you are connected to in your work, in your building, in your neighborhood. People that God has strategically and intentionally and divinely positioned you close to. He's given you proximity and access into their lives so that you can pray for them, so that you can invest in them, so that you can care for them, so that you can speak to them, so that ultimately you can help them find God. And I think if we simplify it or bring it down where it feels maybe accessible, where it's not millions of people or dozens of people, but it's just two, all of a sudden feels like, okay, I can do that. I can kind of run with that. I can see what this is. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break in just a second. But to help you kind of action this, we're doing a couple of things. One is my lovely assistant, Krista, is going to be passing out these little business-size cards. And I want you to do a couple things, okay? So before you pass them out, let me give instructions because they'll not listen to me. And so here's what you're going to do. You're going to get these cards. On the front is like two lines where you can write the names of two people. On the back are three prayers that I want to encourage you to commit praying for them frequently. I don't know what that frequency is, daily, weekly, certainly needs to be more often than monthly in my opinion, but to pray for them frequently. And these prayers are going to prompt you and instruct you and help you seize moments and opportunities to engage with them intentionally and deliberately rather than just like casually or happenstance saying, well, maybe it'll come around one day. So here's what we're going to do. When she passes these cards, I don't want you to just take one. I want you to take two. Not because you need to write 4 names, but because you need to write 2, but you need to write those 2 names 2 times. One for you, and then one that you drop into a basket, and we're going to keep that, not to hold you accountable, because we don't know what your name is, who wrote these names, but we want to pray with you over these people. We want to pray over these names. And so, Krista, you can begin passing these out, and I'll kind of help you as she's doing that. Let me kind of speak to it this way. There's 3 parts to this. There's people, vision, and prayers. Okay? So we're going to take like 10, 15 minutes in just a moment, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to begin putting together the list of people you want to pray for. As it says here, you might have more than 2 people you choose to pray for, but identify at least 2. When you identify those 2 people, I want you to start getting vision for them. Begin to dream about what their lives would look like if they found God. What would change? How would they be different? Get vision, dream for them, and then start praying. Start seeking God now on their behalves by using the prayer prompts, ideas, and prayer cards that have been provided. The second part of this exercise is going to be this. I'm going to play some music. On the back table where the water bottles were at the start of the night, there's a couple sheets of paper that just have some ideas. Ideas that you can use to kind of like, oh, this is how I can. For instance, one of the things I started doing last year was that I realized that when people would say, how was your weekend? I would say, good. They were like, what'd you do? I would talk about everything I got into except for doing church. I'm here for setup. I'm here like 6 hours on a Sunday. It's a thing I do spend the most time doing on a weekend, and I would conveniently not talk about it. I went to a movie. I watched Squid Games. I bought a pair of shoes. I went for a run. And then I just leave it at that. I went out to dinner. So that's an idea, right? Somebody starts asking you on Monday, Tuesday, hey, what'd you do this weekend? I went to church. I had my small group. So things like that, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break. We're going to give you about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. You can begin praying. If you want to move around the room, find space on your own. Again, there's ideas on that back table of different ways with those that are connected to each of those 3 prayers. So again, you can kind of screenshot that or like kind of practically write those things down. But take time to do that. I'm going to cue some music, and then we'll come back for the second part of the teaching.